Welcome. In this webinar, we'll be reviewing the Overbooking Limits tool in RoomKeyPMS. For properties that experience a predictable number of empty rooms on a daily basis, on weekends, during special events, or seasonally, the Overbooking tool in RoomKeyPMS allows a property to strategically overbook a room inventory to reach 100% occupancy. The goal of using an overbooking strategy should be to mitigate the effects of no-shows, last-minute cancellations, and early departures, while also avoiding the need to walk a guest due to an unplanned overbooking situation. In this webinar, we will review the configuration settings and operational functions used with the new Overbooking Limits tool, but it is important that you also develop your own overbooking strategy first before implementing the features we are about to review. Now, before we get started using overbooking limits, there are a few settings that we should take into consideration before we start using the overbooking limits tool. These may affect the way that overbooking appears when creating a reservation or how limits are managed. The first item to consider is that the property inventory is now a new line item that will appear as part of the overbooking tool. This new property inventory line item appears during a reservation. We can see it here appearing at the top of our inventory calendar availability while making a reservation or editing an existing reservation. This line is also a new addition to the inventory calendar. It will also appear as a top line item when viewing inventory for individual dates. The next setting to consider is the overbooking indicator. For properties that are using overbooking limits, the overbooking indicator is a visual cue that appears during the reservation process and lets the user know that a room type may be overbooked. When this tool is in use, the inventory of a room type on a specific day appears shaded in a brown-colored background. We are used to seeing this appear whenever the inventory number is at 0, but now with the overbooking limits, you will also see this shading appear in the background when you are using the overbooking limit inventory to overbook a specific room type. In this example, the user sees that there are rooms available because this value here is larger than 0. And they would also understand that they can proceed with booking the reservation using the overbooking limits inventory for that room type. If you do not want a user to know that they are using overbooking limits inventory to book a room, you can turn off the overbooking indicator, this brown back-colored shading, by accessing the user's clerk ID permissions. So you will access the System Configuration Clerk menu, locate the clerk ID, and select the Permission tab. On the right-hand side, within the Reservation Management category, you will now see a new permission, permission 339, Overbooking Inventory Indicator, and this is an off or empty permission. To prevent the user from seeing the background shading when making a reservation using overbooking limits, you will give this permission 339 to the user, and that will allow them to book the reservation without seeing the background inventory overbooking indicator. We can now see in this example that the reservation can be made. The inventory still appears. However, the user is not aware that they are using part of the overbooking limits inventory to make this reservation. A side-by-side comparison of users with the permission and without the permission can be seen here. By default, without the permission, the user will see the background shading, as exampled on the left-hand side. With the permission, the user would not see the background shading. on the right-hand side here. In both scenarios, the user would be able to proceed with making the reservation using overbooking limits inventory. Another new setting that comes with the Overbooking Limits tool is the ability to set a cutoff limit. Now, by default, properties who allow overbooking may do so up to including the day of arrival. This means that it is possible to overbook the hotel on the current day with same-day reservations and walk-ins. This can be beneficial for properties who have trouble reaching 100% occupancy on a daily basis. Now, if this is not the desired strategy, you can use the overbooking cutoff limit to automatically release overbooking limits on a specific number of days ahead of today. The overbooking cutoff limit setting is found within the Property Master, located on the Preferences tab. You will notice on the right-hand side there is a field indicating overbooking cutoff limit. You can enter this value in a number of days. So again, by default, properties will have this setting set to 0, and that indicates that no cutoff limit is applicable. If you desire to have a cutoff limit, you can enter a value. It could be 1 day, 2 day, or in this example, we have 3-day overbooking cutoff limit entered. This means that when the cutoff tool is in effect, users can no longer overbook a room type within that date range. So between today and the next 3 days, users would not be able to overbook a room type using overbooking limits. Of course, they would still be able to use enable overbooking function. That is something that is taught during our standard reservations training and not specific to the overbooking limits. Now, also too, when this cutoff is in effect, the inventory will now show the actual inventory without any allotment for overbooking. So between now and the next 3 days, if I have used overbooking to overbook my hotel, I may view negative values in my inventory numbers. Now, the final setting to consider when using overbooking limits in RoomKeyPMS is the property limit setting, and this allows you to decide which limit is right for your property. When implementing an overbooking strategy, RoomKeyPMS can support either of the following options based on whether the function is enabled or disabled. In option A, we have a property sum of room type limits function enabled. This setting also appears on the Property Master within the Preferences tab, and it actually appears directly below the previous setting we were just talking about, that overbooking cutoff limit. You will notice a checkbox is available that allows you to enable property sum of room type limits. When this setting is enabled, the property limit will automatically equal the sum of the individual room type limits. Option B is to have this setting disabled. So you can see here on the right-hand side, we have this setting this checkbox is unchecked, and therefore it is disabled. When this setting is disabled, the property limit does not have to equal the sum of the room type limits. In fact, the property limit would be managed independently in this second option, option B. Now, a side-by-side comparison of these two options when we are viewing the overbooking calendar reveals the mathematics that are in play behind these settings. So when option A, when the property sum of room time limits is enabled, and the property limit will equal the sum of the individual room types. We can see that here represented in the OB or overbooking column within the overbooking calendar. The values of the room type limits here represented by the number 1, 2, and 5 automatically equal the property limit. The user is not required to manage these values independently. The property limit will automatically equal the summation of these individual room type limits. In our second example, option B, this is where the function is disabled or that checkbox is unchecked. And we can see here that the individual room type limits represented by 10 and 10 do not equal the property limit, which we can see entered into the very top column here as well. In this example, the user or the property would be managing their property limit overall. So in this case, on this specific day, users may book 10 rooms in the K and L room type, or 10 rooms in the KSL room type, or a combination of either or, as long as it reaches a total number of overbooking, property limit number 10 at the top here. Now that we've had an opportunity to review some of the new settings that come with our Overbooking Limits tool, let's take a look at how to use the Overbooking Limits tool inside RoomKeyPMS. The first thing that we'll look at is how to access and view the overbooking limits. When you are logged into RoomKey, you can access the System Configuration drop-down menu, and you will now see the Overbooking Limits function available in the drop-down list. When you click on Overbooking Limits, you will now see an Overbooking Calendar window appear. The Overbooking Calendar features navigation tools that allow us to display information for a specific day. We can also navigate to previous or advance to next week's information using the buttons here and refresh the information as needed. Now, this information is displayed similar to our inventory calendar, where we have a list of our room types on the left-hand column. We have information about the maximum occupancy, the rate, and the total physical inventory. Now, unique to the overbooking calendar is that each day is split into inventory and overbooking inventory, or overbooking limits, pardon me, that is represented by the OB, or overbooking column here. So we can see individual overbooking limits on each specific day in the overbooking calendar based on the navigation tools that we have set in the top left-hand corner. Now that we know how to access and view overbooking limits using the overbooking calendar, we will now take a look at managing overbooking limits, and we're going to look at a couple of different scenarios. Our first one is managing overbooking limits when the property sum of the room type limits is enabled. So that function in the property preferences tab is enabled. We have two methods or two ways to insert or edit the overbooking limit. The first one is using an edit mode. Now, once you have accessed the overbooking limits calendar, overbooking limits tool inside RoomKey, you can use the edit mode, which is located, a checkbox that is located in the bottom left-hand corner, to edit or change individual values on individual days that are displayed in this inventory calendar view. Now, a little reminder here, because this is a property with the property sum of room type limits enabled, I am not able to edit the property limit. Rather, I need to edit the individual limits for a specific room type on a specific day. I would use the post button in the lower right-hand corner to make these changes. And you can now see that the overbooking property limit automatically equals the sum of the individual room type limits I entered using edit mode. Now, the second method that I can use to manage overbooking limits is using insert limits. Again, from the overbooking calendar, this time, instead of using edit mode, I will select the insert limits button that is located on the bottom of the overbooking calendar. When I select insert limits, this allows me to change values for a single day or a range of dates, as well as specific days of the week. I'm still not able to edit the property limit value because of the setting that is enabled within the Preferences tab for this property. However, I can now enter in specific limits. Let's go ahead and add 2 and 3. Maybe we'll add 3 to the bottom room type as well. As you add values into your overbooking or OB column, you will see the ability to checkmark or update these individual values. When using the Insert Limits tool, I can now insert a date range, so my date from this set as May. We'll do the second week of May, actually. And once you have selected a date range, you will automatically see the days of the week check off down below. So similar to the Rate Wizard tool, you can have this fluctuate on between the days of the week within this date range. I can check or uncheck these days of the week in order to apply or not apply these insert limits that I've entered into the overbooking column up above. I'm going to go ahead and apply this for all the days of the week. So in order to apply these changes, I'm going to select Save in the lower right-hand corner. I will receive a confirmation notification from RoomKey. And now I can actually exit out of the insert limits, and I can see how those limits have now been updated for a full date range. So this is very effective, the insert limits tool, whenever you are updating a range of dates, rather than needing to use the edit mode to individually change each number on each day. Now that we have reviewed some managing functions, let's take a look at those same functions when the property sum of room type limits function is disabled. So that setting inside the Preferences tab is now disabled. The checkmark is removed from the checkbox. And just like the previous demonstration, there are 2 ways to insert or edit the overbooking limit. However, this time we will see that the property limit can also be managed using these 2 tools, and it does not automatically calculate for the user. So the first method that we'll take a look at is the edit mode once again. When the property sum of room type limits is disabled and I want to update or manage my overbooking limits on a single day, I can use the edit mode located in the bottom left-hand corner. I'll place a check mark into edit mode. And because this property will be managing their property limit individually, I may decide that I want to overbook my property by 3 rooms on this specific day. Now, to make up these 3 rooms, I do not care if it is 3 double rooms, 3 queen rooms, or 3 king rooms. All I want to do is overbook the hotel by 3 rooms in total. It could be any combination of these values that I've entered down below. Once you have entered your individual values, you can select Post in the right-hand corner, and that update will now be complete. We can see that when this setting is disabled, that my property limit is entered manually by the user. It is individually managed and not related to the sum of these room type limits. Now we also have a second method for managing overbooking limits. When the property sum of the room type limit function is disabled, we can also use the Insert Limits tool. From the overbooking calendar, I can navigate to the bottom of the screen and I would be able to access the Insert Limits tool. When clicked, I have my pop-up window appear, and you will notice when you are using the Insert Limits, when this Room Type Limits function is disabled, you will be able to now manage the property limit independently of the individual room type limits. Just as we saw in the previous demonstration, we can also update individual limits. Let's go ahead and overbook the property by 3 rooms. Actually, let's do 4 rooms this time. It could be a combination of double rooms, queen rooms, or king rooms. Again, the property limit does not need to equal the sum of these individual room limits. The property limit itself will act as somewhat of a gateway, preventing any further reservations once this limit has been reached. So the overall property limit is going to be 4 in this case, but it could be any combination of 2 doubles, 2 queens, or 2 kings, or any combination thereof. Again, because I'm using my Insert Limits tool, I can use my date range function at the bottom, so I can select a date from and a date to. Let's go ahead and apply this for some dates in May. And once again, I could choose to apply this for specific days of the week within my selected date range. Once you are happy with the limits you've entered in the top portion of the calendar, the date range and the days of the week you've entered down below, you can select Save on the right-hand corner, and this will update that information for you. Now, when I close out of my Insert Limits tool, I will view my property limit calendar. Let me just scroll ahead here. And I can now see that I have overbooking limits entered into those appropriate days. Oh, pardon me. Great, so I just had to navigate ahead to May 5th. I can now see those overbooking or OB limits now appear in the OB column, subject to those date ranges that I had entered using the Insert Limits tool. Now, there may be some times that you wish to have the property limit reflect the sum of the individual room type limits. Now, when this function is disabled inside the Property Preferences tab, again, as we've already established, this property limit is managed independently of these individual property or individual room type limits. But if there is a case where you would like to automatically recalculate the property limit as a sum of the individual room type limits, that is a function that can be formed even when the property sum of room type limits tool is disabled in the Property Preferences tab. So this process of recalculating the property limit to equal the sum of the room type limits can be performed on a database where the property sum of room type limits is disabled, and it allows us to recalculate the property limit so that it reflects the sum of the individual room type limits. This function, you will see, can be recalculated for a single day, or you can do it for a range of dates. So once again, I'm looking at my overbooking calendar for this property that we recently worked with to add in overbooking limits. We can see here the individual room type limits do not equal the property limit. So in order to do this recalculation, I'm going to use the Insert Limits button. Instead of entering values into the top grid, I'm going to go directly to my date range, my date from and date to. Let's go ahead and reset this for the 6th, 7th, and 8th of May. And I'm going to use the property equals sum limits function here. I'm going to place a check mark into this checkbox and simply select save. RoomKey now lets me know that there are no changes in inventory, and it asks me if I would like to recalculate the property sum. I'll select yes, and when that function is complete, I can now close the Insert Limits tool, and I can review those settings now in my overbooking calendar. For May 6th, we have now recalculated the property limit so that it equals the sum of the individual room type limits. So 2, 2, 2 equals a total of 6, whereas my previous setting, I had that property limit set to 4. The final management tool that I would like to review is the adjustment history that is available for overbooking limits. Inside the overbooking calendar, we also have an adjustment history button. Now this is available on all overbooking calendars. When you access the adjustment history, this will open a new window which displays the overbooking adjustments. For any users that have used adjustment history in the past, we can view a date range of changes that have been made. So we can enter in a date range, refresh that information, and that will display a list of all of the changes that have been made. Now you can investigate these changes in a little more detail, but a couple of the things that I would like to highlight for you today is the modification date column, which will show the date and timestamp that a change was made. And the very last column here displays a list of clerk IDs. So this will tell you not only, or the adjustment history will tell you not only when a change was made, but who made that change. So you can follow up with the appropriate clerk directly. Our final topic for today's webinar is to view how the changes in the Overbooking Limits tool and Overbooking Calendar affects the inventory calendar and reports in RoomKeyPMS. So the inventory calendar with Overbooking Limits, the Include Overbooking Limits checkbox appears in the inventory calendar. All properties will now notice a new checkbox that appears in their inventory calendar, which can be accessed from the Operations drop-down menu or F12 on your keyboard. We've already mentioned that the property line item is new for all properties. The other new item is this Include Overbooking Limits. This checkbox will appear for all properties. However, if a property is not using overbooking limits, this checkbox will not have any effect when it is enabled or disabled. For our users that are using the overbooking limits, this checkbox will be checked by default, and it will automatically include overbooking limits in all of your totals here. When you uncheck this checkbox, it will automatically remove any of those overbooking limits that you have applied for future dates. So here we can see April 26 does change when we check and uncheck that overbooking limits checkbox. Now this also affects some of the reports that can be produced from the inventory calendar. When this Include Overbooking Limits is checked by default, and I print a copy of the inventory calendar, we can see that these limits are included in my inventory calendar printout. Likewise, when I print the inventory detail for a single day, such as May 6th here in my calendar view, when the Include Overbooking Limits checkbox is checked, I can see that my display is letting me know that there is a total inventory for all rooms, including overbooking limits, and it gives me that value, including those overbooking limits, for that specific day. If you do not want to include overbooking limits, you can uncheck the checkbox and select the calendar once again. And now we can see my inventory detail is displayed, but it does not include those overbooking limits. At this time, the inventory calendar printed report as well as daily inventory reports are the only reports that are affected by the overbooking limits. If I close out of the inventory calendar, the remaining reports that are available in RoomKeyPMS remain unaffected by overbooking limits. They will continue to display actual inventory or physical rooms available for each of the statistical and financial values displaying inventory. So with that, that brings us to the end of our Overbooking Limits webinar. Thank you very much for joining me.